My name is Jeff Conrad. I'm one of the content experience managers on the Modern Assistance and Content Experience team here at Microsoft. Uh, for the last 13 years, I've been working at Microsoft. For about the first 7.5 years, I worked on the Access test team. Specifically, I was on the Access Services team, the team that helped create the web databases and the web apps, and then afterwards on desktop features. About 5.5 years ago, I moved over to the content side because there was an opportunity to work on Access content, and that's a particular passion of mine. So I appreciate the invite. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick little message to the MVPs. This will be quite a bit of material. Will be something that you've already seen that I've been and my team have been presenting during the summits. So some of this will be some repeat information. But for the rest of everybody, I want to talk about our end user content landscape, essentially the help system, which is probably for some of you the thing that you loathe the most about Access. It may be something that you use very infrequently or frequently. And then I want to talk about our content cleanup updates. And then some data metrics that I can share with you. I'm a little bit more restricted with what some of the data I can share in the public setting, so there'll be a little bit less deep dive on some of the content metrics compared to what I can share with the MVPs. And then we'll go over what we're doing next and followed up by a Q&A. So going over our particular content landscape, my specific team, the people that I oversee, cover Access Excel, Microsoft Forms, Visio, Sway, Publisher, and InfoPath. And for those versions, we support all of the currently supported Microsoft versions. So that's Office 2010 up through the subscription versions for the Windows side. And we also support the Mac versions. That's more specifically Excel. And then the web properties for like Excel Online, Visio Online, Sway and Forms are obviously online applications. And then we also support the iOS and Android. So it's a lot to cover. I do have a manager counterpart that she oversees Word, PowerPoint, and Outlook, as well as some other things. And my team also, I didn't put it on this slide, we've been helping out a little bit in some of the Windows spaces as well, specifically activation, some of the printing content as well. So that's what my specific team oversees. This slide is just a lot to look at first, but this gives you a sense and idea of all of the work and the areas that we actually cover. We are not doing all of these things all the time, every single day, but my team has done essentially all of these items. And when we look at the customer journey for people that are using the product, we cover the whole spectrum. We cover somebody that's just opening Access or any of the other products in my space for the very first time, to people like you who are very experienced in the product, developer mindset, and using it for decades, maybe even since day one of Access. We cover everything. And so there's a lot of content that a lot of people in this group may not find useful because you've already advanced past that kind of learning curve. But we do cover all of this. We are specifically focusing more recently over the last, I'd say, year and a half on working with our product teams to make sure the UX, the user interface, the words that you see for any new feature work are very clear, concise, trying to be as less techy as possible. If some of you are very familiar with some of the JET and ACE database engine error messages, they can be a little cryptic sometimes. So what we're trying to do with all of the new feature work that the product teams are working on, any words presented, we have a say in that. We are reviewing with our product teams the UX side of things. But as you see along this whole customer journey of discovery of new features, of even new applications, we work with a video team within our group for training videos. they're the ones that actually create the videos, but we help create the script and what we're going to cover for videos. We do just a huge amount of work on help content, kind of that bread and butter of essentially the help system. But we also work on first run experiences and infographics. We do quick start guides. We help with tips. We make guided walkthroughs and learning guides, and even templates to a lesser extent. We've done sample downloads. We've worked on some exploratory work with example library for Excel. And of course, we do a lot of data wallowing, essentially, where we're looking at the data, the signals that we get from our content. People on my team have gone on customer visits to learn specifically firsthand how customers are using Access as well as the other products. And we review forum posts, community engagements, and take all that information and hopefully work that into our help content. Want to take a moment to briefly describe the breakdown of how our help system overall is covered by the various teams. On the left is essentially the area that my team covers. Anything that's on support.office.com. That's essentially our group. We're responsible for everything that's under that URL, that website. So we have a PM, an engineering and design team that helps create the website. They help create the infrastructure for the help pane that you see in the app. But what is surfaced within that website and within the help pane is the content that our team creates. Currently, we have about 900 articles around Access specifically. On the right side, anything that falls under docs.microsoft.com is outside my specific team. And I realize that for a lot of you, the information that's on docs.microsoft.com may be something that you're using more often than probably the stuff and the content that my team supports. But that is outside my specific team. All of that content is now on GitHub. They do allow people outside Microsoft, of course, to contribute to this. And so if you see something wrong in the docs.microsoft.com content, you're more than welcome and encouraged to go make an update using the GitHub system. I believe they have roughly around 2,000 articles for Access, and that covers VBA. That also covers the specific objects, collections, and models. That also covers JET and ACE database engine errors. So there's a lot of content that they have on their side. One thing I don't have on this slide is content that is for admin and IT professionals that are deploying Office, Microsoft 365. That content also lives on docs.microsoft.com, but that is also outside my specific team. It's a partner team within Max here. So essentially what I'm going to be talking mostly about is what's on the left side. That's my specific team. A lot of questions that we see about in the forum is around localization. So I did want to have a little quick discussion about the localization process. My team only works on the English version of our help content. And when we publish a change, either it's a brand new article or it's updates to an existing article, those changes go live in about a minute and sometimes even 10 to 15 seconds, very quick. That's a huge improvement to what we used to have, which I think years ago we published once a week, or later on then it was once a day, I think. So if we saw something that was incorrect, something that needed fixing, there was a long lag between actually correcting that. But we can now make changes within less than a minute using the improvements that our engineering team has made to the publishing process. There are lots of times the MVPs have noticed something that is incorrect and brought it to our attention. And depending upon what the changes are, we've been able to make those changes within minutes and then reply very quickly that the changes are live. But that's only in the English version. What happens after we publish, then that starts the localization handoff. And the localization process picks up everything that's contained within that article. That's the words, if there's videos, if there's any screenshots, that all gets picked up, and then the 36 languages start in parallel with the localization process. And that's a combination of human translation and machine translation. That depends on what we set as the low priority. If we have something that's very important, very high touch, potentially legal implications, something that we need very quick turnaround on, then that will get first priority and will be completely human translated. Other cases, there is a mix of machine translation happening. So generally what happens when we publish something, a full machine translation usually appears first because it can get published quickly. As the human translation comes on board, then the human translated article then swaps out for the machine translation. What's the turnaround time for that? I check with our localization team before making the slide, and usually that's about 48 hours now when we start seeing the human translated versions of our content go live. That's assuming that we don't have a huge length of article that would take a little bit longer to localize. And then those 36 languages get localized and they get published as they're ready. They don't all go out at once. It's just if the French version is ready, if the German version is ready, then it immediately goes live. After an article is published, if we are making small changes, maybe we're just updating some links, or if we're updating a little bit of text, more often than not, those small changes are machine translated. If large changes are being made, then we are trying to have humans look at that to make sure that's the best translation. So what I want to talk, the bulk of our session today is around the content cleanup work. The scale that you see is more or less just a graphic to illustrate where we've been focusing our time. The left side being working with the product teams on new feature UX and new feature help content. I could easily spend an entire session or more just talking about all of the new work that we're doing, the changes that we're making to the help infrastructure, the help pane. But that element is usually more visible for everyone. What you may not be aware of is all the work that we've been doing to essentially clean up our mess, remodeling our existing content that gets a lot of page views, consolidating and deduplicating our content, and cleaning up our context-sensitive help. I'm not going to sit here and say the help system is wonderful. I'm sure there's probably a lot of comments happening in the chat window now, which I don't see. Mentioning the help system is not great. But I do want to focus on, this is what we look like a few years ago. This is just my personal analogy. We essentially just had a mess, an absolute mess in the content. And this is not just Access. These are the other Office versions as well. We had just not done a good job of essentially cleaning up and weeding our garden, so to speak. My goal is to get to here. We want things to be a lot better. We want things to be easy to find. So that's what the work that we've been doing, and that's what I want to focus on. Our biggest problem with our Access help is something that might surprise you. We had too much content. I know there's a lot of people that would say can't find the content or it's inaccurate. But quite honestly, our biggest problem, first and foremost, is we had too much content, and more specifically, duplicated content. We used to be in a system of every 3 years, we would ship a new Office version. And so we would build up an entire amount of content specific for that version. when we started to publish our content, then all of that content was essentially competing against itself. So what you see on the right side is an actual screenshot from a few years ago of our content management system. You can see that we had duplicate titled content, multiples, and this is not as bad as it used to be. We'd sometimes have 3 or 4 versions of the exact same article title, all competing for search. Since the 2007 version was the oldest version up on the web, Google and Bing would index that more, and no matter what version that you would search for, about 45% of the time, you would land on a 2007 only article, even if you were using one of the later versions. And most of our content was not indexed, but that is also improved. So what we were seeing is that we were just essentially creating more and more problems with each release. We were just creating more content that people weren't landing on. So what did we do to address that? The key was to consolidate essentially like versions or identical content down into one topic, or depending upon the case, maybe two topics, breaking it out into separate ones. From that previous screenshot, you probably saw that, for example, there was an article titled Introduction to Queries. We had multiple versions of these. Almost every word for word on those articles were the same, except for instead of saying Access 2007 in the text, it would say 2010 or 2013. In a few small cases, ribbon entry points were slightly different, or they were moved slightly between 2007 and 2010. But 99% of the content, as you know, is essentially the same version to version. But most people were not landing on the later versions. So what we did was we consolidated that into one topic. We used the asset that was getting the most external search hits, and in general, that was the 2007 version. And we could make the content more version agnostic. And in some cases, we would make use of a new tab control, which we did not have many years ago in our website content. And we would partition out the content on various tabs if the UX and the entry points were vastly different, if the steps were very different. What we were finding when we were going through this work, and this is a couple years of work that we've been working to consolidate down and retire and redirect the traffic from the ones we don't want anymore to one, is that there's more of our content is fully indexed now. The overall content satisfaction has gone up. We're not having to localize as many versions now, and we're getting a much clearer signal, because instead of data being spread across multiple versions, we can just have it on one article. So if there's something wrong or something we need to correct on, say, the Introduction to Queries article, we can just correct it in one place instead of 3 or 4 different places. Here's just a couple examples of what we just refer to as evergreen. Evergreen is just an internal word that we use to refer to content that applies to multiple versions rather than just a singular one. On the left is our validation rules topic, and then you can see that it applies to all of the supported versions, where right below the title. On the right side is an example where we're using our tab control in our content. We have one tab that's around 2007 and 2010 and one for 2013. You might be wondering, wait a minute, why do you have a Office 2013 tab around DBase when DBase was essentially dropped? It was not in 2013. DBase was still in 2013 one of the key search terms. And so with the tab control, we can now at least indicate, if you select that tab, it just essentially tells you pretty short that it's not supported in that version. You need to use a later version. If you look at an article that has a tab control in the app, you only see that tab's content. If you look at this article on the web, you see all tabs, and then it's on the user to essentially select which version they're using. So what's the end result? Why am I telling you all this? 2 years ago, 6.1% of every one of our Access articles was an exact word for word, letter for letter, exact titled duplicate content. That does not even include the articles that were a close approximation, like just one word different, or like one of the titles would include the version number. That was 2 years ago, and as of now, we have zero. We do not have a single article that has duplicated title anywhere. We finished that work last year. Access was the very first Office application to reach this milestone. We've been working on other applications to do this as well. Access was the first to reach this milestone. About 4.5 years ago, I actually have been taking screenshots of using our Power BI dashboards. Here's the total number of assets that we had 4.5 years ago and the versions that they applied to. We had close to 1,500 articles. That red block is the max version that these content would go to. So as you see there, roughly, if I'm eyeballing that, about 600 articles were only applied up to 2007. And for the latest versions, we only had around 400 to 450 articles. So the later versions, if you searched within the app, you would get much less results than you would for 2007. By consolidating our content, here's our net result as of now. We have just a little over 900 assets. So we've reduced the total content by 37%. You might be wondering, has that negatively impacted page views or satisfaction? On quite the contrary, our satisfaction on our articles has gone up a lot, and our page views have actually increased. Since we have more of our content indexed, and we have less content for people to wade through that's competing against each other, we've seen a dramatic increase in terms of page views as well as satisfaction. That far right graphic essentially tells you the application version that appears at the top of the screen for these articles, which versions they apply to. We now have 615 of those 900 plus assets are applicable to all versions. And so you see less duplication now. I want to switch gears and talk about our context-sensitive help cleanup. Context-sensitive help is whenever you see a help entry point in the product and you click to get help, or in some cases you press F1. So here's 4 cases, 4 different examples. There's a help button on a message dialog box. On the expression builder, there's one. We also have ribbon, tell me more, and learn more links. And then on modal dialog boxes, there's a help question mark. All of those are context-sensitive help entry points. Here is an example of what should work. When you click that, a specific context-sensitive help ID is called, as well as the Access version that you're using. It makes a call up to the server, and it's specifically saying, do I have a match for an article that is tagged with that help ID and the version in use? In this particular case, that macro message box works. The help ID is working correctly. An error is when either one of 2 things happens. An article does not have the help ID associated with it or the version. Here's an example that is currently not working. And if anyone wants to try this out, you can try it out very easily. If you open up any table data sheet, doesn't matter your version, doesn't matter your language. If you open up any table data sheet, right-click one of the columns, select hide, that hides one of the columns in the data sheet. If you right-click again and select unhide, you get this small little dialog box, and feel free to try it out right now. If you click that question mark, you get taken to our top categories page, which is essentially failing. That's our fallback. If something doesn't work, we fall back to our main just kind of landing page. The help ID that's called is essentially 39023, and you can actually see it in the URL parameter. Access can't find that, and so it defaults back. That's a broken context-sensitive help. That's essentially for us a broken customer experience. They need help. They're looking for help right then and there, and we essentially failed them. So we've been working very, very hard to fix a lot of these cases. Here's our current context-sensitive help error rates. That's the far right column. And the middle column shows you how many specific and unique context-sensitive help IDs are currently being called within the last, I think this is the last 28 days. As you can see, the subscription version, since it's getting more features added, that has around the most context-sensitive helps IDs being called. The average rating on is the average rating of the content that people are reviewing when they land on that content. To compare, the context-sensitive help error rates before we started this were easily around the 15 to 20%. 15 to 20% of the time, someone would press F1 or click a help button, and they would actually be taken to nothing, our fallback page. That was not great. I'm going to switch my screen for just a second. Something that you won't see, but I just need to do a quick change here in something on our side. I'm just playing with something in the background for the help system. Now, another area of context-sensitive help is disambiguation. What's disambiguation? That's when you click a help button and you get more than one result. This happens when an article is tagged with the same context-sensitive help ID and for the same version. The case that you see on the left is specifically for the subscription version, and I believe this was in the backstage area. You would see 3 results return. Context-sensitive help disambiguation, also for us, it's not necessarily an error. You're landing on something, but you're not landing on kind of the one best article that you need where you are. What you see is on the right is a screenshot of some Power BI dashboards from a few years ago, a couple years ago. Over 400,000 hits were in a 6-month period where we were landing people on more than one result. We wanted to clean that up as well. And as of last year, for access, that is completely fixed. You should never see more than one result return. We were the first Office version to reach this milestone. Many others have not reached this yet. Access was the very first one to now reach this internal goal for us. MS Graph. This is the older charting functionality within Access. I realize most of you probably do most of your charting within Excel. That's fine. A lot of people still use this charting functionality, and if you are using in the design mode, you get taken to a separate window, and it has its own toolbar with a help button. This may surprise some of you, may not, if you haven't looked at this. The help experience here was broken for the last 12 years. I'm not exaggerating. It did not work in any version from 2007 on. If you clicked help, you essentially got nothing. If you searched within the help, you got nothing. Context-sensitive help entry points didn't work at all. Every single element of the charting help system was completely broken for the last 12 years. I could go into a lot of detail as to why that is the case, but the technical details don't need to be shared here. But what we've done is completely fix that. As of last year, that is completely working again. I believe about 95% of all context-sensitive help calls within this area now work. If you press F1, you actually get to an article. You get links off to some of our main content around this space. So we fixed that up. That was a personal goal of mine to fix that. I do need to switch gears and talk about context-sensitive help where you will still see issues. Access is one of the most complicated areas in terms of help because we have kind of a differentiated context-sensitive help system. If you are on any of the property sheets and you press F1 on any of the property sheet items, you actually get taken to docs.microsoft.com, not the content that we oversee. I know that sounds very confusing. Why do we have that? Again, lots of technical reasons, but that's not something that we can change. That would have to be a massive product change. So any property sheet, tables, queries, forms, reports, controls, all of those go to docs, and those are outside my team's control. Currently, what you see on the right is all the ones that I know are currently not working. Those properties, if you press F1, you essentially get taken to docs, and I think the docs page is essentially, couldn't find what you needed or something like that. So we need to be working with the other partner team that covers this to fix these. They first need to create new articles for these and then set up the metadata. So no one needs to email me about which ones are not working. We know exactly which ones are not working, but this is something that my team cannot fix. It has to be the other team. And so we are still in the process of cleaning up our areas. And so hopefully we can reach a point where if that team hasn't fixed these yet, maybe we could help with that. So I want to switch gears now and talk about some of the end user content metrics. The end result of the work that we do, we get lots of data signals. One of the most important being at the bottom of every article, there's a question: was this information helpful, or did this solve your problem? You can either click yes or no, and both options give you the availability to type something out. Like if this wasn't helpful for you, if you saw something that was wrong, you can click no, this wasn't helpful, and you can type out something to hopefully get us to improve something. Some people will click yes and also still leave a comment. I have a few samples there from that right side. We also get a lot of signals around what people are searching for within the help pane, the help viewer, depending upon which version you're using. We also get data around what people are searching for in the tell me box in the latest versions. And we also can analyze what people are clicking, what are they looking for as far as related and see also type of content. So we have a lot of data points. It's a huge signal. There's a lot coming in. Generally, what we're trying to do is sometimes look at the micro level and sometimes at the macro level. If we're looking at in one article specifically where we want to make improvements, then we look at the article comments and the article ratings for just that one asset, and we try and look for the specific areas of comments in there that can help us. We get a lot of comments that honestly are unhelpful, where the comment is, this didn't help me, or I didn't find what I needed. Those are good signals for us, but they're not as always actionable as somebody giving us very specific information. So as you see here, this one was the video quality was bad. Oh, okay. Well, that's something that we can take to our video team. We have some other ones where there's lots of comments, and there's one in there that helps zero in on what the issue is that people are seeing. Step 4 is actually incorrect. It should be this. That's very helpful for us. When we were looking at this, we kind of, this is nothing in terms of how we we separate content out physically within our content management system, but this is how we look at where we focus our work. We have over 900 articles. That's obviously down from much more, 37%. We look at the signals as a whole, all of the content all up. We also look at a smaller subset, which is content that is applicable to the latest version and just a few of our various content types. Where we have generally focused most of our time, where we're remodeling key content, is the smallest circle. The top search intents. What are the things people are searching for the most? And that's about 46 assets. And some of these have videos, some don't. Those are the top search intents. And so I'm showing you this to set up the stage for some of the next slides to follow. This was that smallest circle, those 46 assets. What you see on the left are buckets. They're not individual articles. They're buckets of areas of content around expressions, external data, forms, etc. And you can actually see fiscal year and the quarter overall how that content was doing. Not wonderful. We had roughly, in the mid 50% range. So about half the time people liked the content, about half the time they didn't. So with all of our content deduplication effort, fixing up the context sensitive health, and most especially these top search intent articles, really digging into the comments and the ratings, improving this as best we can. Here's the result over the last couple of years. I'm not hiding any data here. This is right off of our Power BI dashboards. We've dramatically increased the overall content satisfaction of the top search intents, close to 20% better than what it was. And it's consistently been high now for the last year plus. In fiscal year 19 quarter two, where there was a dip, we actually think that was a little bit of a data issue on our side, because we saw similar dips across all Office applications. So we actually think that was actually a data anomaly there. But overall, the content is much, much better. Our customers are really finding our content much more correct, much more accurate, much more useful. Here are the most viewed articles, just for your own personal reference. The top 20 most viewed help articles within my team space are on the left, and the average rating for them. The one on the right is what articles get the most external search hits, the most views. Now, we only have so many hours in the day. We only have so many hours in a week. We have to work on new features as well. So when we have time to work on cleaning up existing content and improving it, we use a completely data-driven approach. Obviously, you can see one standout on the left side is performing pretty low at 34%. Why does Access want me to enter a parameter value? And on the right, the lowest one is formatted date and time field. So if our writers had time to work on improving some existing content, we would immediately go to the ones that are getting the most page views but are also performing the worst. That's where we focus our efforts. This is probably what more people in this particular group would be interested to know. How does the languages compare? This is, I think, the last 3 months of data broken down by market, the average rating for the localized versions. As I mentioned at the start of this session, my team only works in English, and then the localization teams will localize the content that we create. But here's how it performs. A huge difference. Do we have areas of our locales that could be improved? Absolutely. Is there work that needs to be done? Absolutely. Our localization team continues to use their metrics to identify areas to improve the content. Obviously, if you look at here, Thailand is the highest one. Thank you, Thailand. The Thai versions of our content are rated very high. We have a lot of work to do in Slovenia. That appears to be the lowest one for the various languages. So if you see your language there, that's how all of our 900 assets have done over the last 3 months. It's a wide spectrum. We also look at our in-app help searches. Thought you might be interested to see back in October 2015, what were the top 10 in-app help searches? This is what people were looking at, was searching for in-app. Query being the top one. 1 year later, navigation pane suddenly appears, and it's the number one. We have a theory that sometime between October of 2015 and October of 2016, we probably had a lot of customers that were updating for probably much older versions like 2003, 2002, 2000, up to probably either 2007 or 2010 or maybe even 2013, a later version where they're introduced to the navigation pane for the first time. 1 year later, here's how that compares. Still, navigation pane. Input mask moved up all the way into the second position, and primary key. Just last month, navigation pane still continues to be the number one most searched element within the help pane itself. So we really want to make sure our navigation pane content, our primary key content, our input mask content is performing well. And if you saw from I think 2 or 3 slides previously, it's doing really, really well in the 70% range. So what's next? What are we working on next? As I mentioned, we're continuing to work on new feature work with the product teams, working with Ebo and the whole product team. But as far as cleanup work, the next huge mountain that we need to do is our reference set duplication. As I mentioned, we have been removing the duplication within the content on support.office.com. However, there is duplication across sites between support.office.com and docs.microsoft.com. On the left, you can actually see specific numbers. There's 270 topics that we have the exact same content on SOC and docs. There's SQL syntax, there's macro reference, and there's function references. So it doesn't make sense. They're all competing against each other for search. So what we want to do is remove the duplication. Our plan is to remove the support.office.com ones and use docs as the go-to place for, that's the developer-focused references, if you will. And so the issues that we need to address are, in most cases, the ones that we oversee, the SOC one, is a little bit more up to date than the ones on docs. So what we want to do is make sure we fold in all the most recent information into the content that's on docs, and then redirect the search traffic from the SOC articles to docs. So we don't lose the search authority. We don't lose the search indexing from Google and Bing. We'll essentially teach them that the docs one. That will further reduce our content down another 270. So we're continuing to get down to a manageable set. And by doing this work, we're actually identifying gaps where we have places that we did not have content where we should. This work we're hoping to maybe do within the next few months. This will require a partnership with the developer content team on docs. I don't have a specific date when we're hoping to finish this, but we'd like to maybe complete this work over the next few months to remove this duplication and get down to a cleaner set of content. I know that's a lot of information to go through, but I'm ready and open to any questions that people have. I realize that these are difficult times for everybody, and I hope everyone stays safe, stays healthy. And if there's any questions, I'm ready to take them from Peter and Carl. While their team, while they're teeing up, if anyone would like to try that earlier context sensitive help that I had you test, feel free to go click the help button on that unhide columns dialog box. If you're using the English version, and if I did things right, that should actually work now. Might take a little longer for localized versions, but while talking to you, I fixed that, added the help ID to the article that we have, and that is now fixed instantly for all the English versions, which means thousands of people, thousands of instances will now be fixed from here on for all versions of Access. That help entry point should work. Okay.
So that proves how easy it is to make the help content better. You can do it besides presenting here.
Exactly.
Easy job that you have.
Yeah. Well, for us, I mean, there's a lot of satisfaction in fixing something that should just work. And so in that particular case, what I just did there by fixing that's now fixed across the world eventually here within the next day or two for the localized versions. In every version, there's a lot of satisfaction in making that work.
There are a couple of questions from the chat. For example, Klaus Oberdahlhof asked, why is it not possible to set Office programs for help for ENUS automatically, so for the English original and not for machine translations, because they are wonderful.
Okay. Now, I have a follow-up question, though. Is the question around the content that shows up in the product or on the web?
Klaus, are you there?
Both. Very clear, both.
Okay.
Because the translated version is, sorry, you don't use Google Translator, you use Bing, and Bing translation is much worse than others. Sorry to be that harsh, but
no offense taken. No offense taken. For the in-app help, I believe that is controlled by the settings of the Office application. What you set as the default language, and so that is covered by essentially Office all up. For the website, what happens is, if I'm not mistaken, if you're using Google or Bing and you search and you land on our content, it's checking to see what your Windows locale is, I think, and it will bring up the localized version that your Windows setting is. If there is no article that is localized for that specific one, then the fallback is English. But I don't think there's a way to set the website defaults to always bring up the English, but I can double check.
Next question would be, where have all the old KB articles disappeared? Where and why? So it's a more general question. How do you decide about letting content disappear or not?
Okay, so good
Especially
question.
for the KB articles.
Yeah, KB articles live on support.microsoft.com. And as I mentioned, our team controls support.office.com. So support.microsoft.com is where the KB articles live. And those are generally overseen by our support team, not our content team. And the support team is generally trying to purge essentially the oldest stuff. They're trying to clean up their space as well. So I don't have exact information as to when they decide to remove some KBs. What are the specific metrics that make them decide to remove a KB article? It could just be length. It could be how past old the version is. If it's maybe there's a page view threshold. If it gets below a certain page view threshold, they may unpublish. That's how I believe they're operating. I don't have the specifics as to when and why they actually remove a KB article, but there's also an overall push, and I'm not saying from us or even the support side, but much higher up, that we should be showing the content just for the supported versions, which is, I mean, you can make an argument that obviously there are still people using much older versions and they still need help, but if they're out of the extended support time, then there is sometimes a push to remove that older content because it is no longer supported. I know that's not a really great answer, and that's probably not a full complete answer that you'd like to see and hear, but that's how my understanding is.
Does your team decide to retire articles with few counts, or how do you decide? Just old ones or counts?
Great question. So what we've been looking at, the content that we have been retiring, those hundreds and hundreds of articles that we've been retiring, where we've retired so far has just been on duplication. There's more than one asset, all covering the same intent, the same topic, if you will. So we've been removing the duplication, just the clones. There, I would say, if an article is barely getting any page views, we have been retiring some of that content because people can't find it. If there's only maybe like 5 page views a month, it may not be worth to have it around, and maybe we could just take that content and put it in another article or a related article. And so for us, we
are running out of time, Jeff. So we just can do a quick question and answer. Maybe you can answer this one. What's your opinion on having a modified date on help articles to help us look at the latest docs?
I would say that is something that our team is looking at. That comes automatically with content that's on docs. Our content does not do that automatically, but there have been discussions about having a modified date put on our content. So I would say it's a possibility that could come in the future.
Next quick question: how about offline help? Are you completely focusing on online? Is offline dead?
Yes, offline help is something that our PM and engineering team hear quite often. I don't have a full and complete answer here as well. I do know that it is something that people need, especially if they have bad internet connectivity or intermittent connectivity. I can't make any promises whether that might be something that we want to do at some point. There is a downside, obviously, to offline help in that it will never be as up to date as our live content, because we're making changes every day. But I will just add your feedback to the information that we've been taking to our leadership, that offline help is important for some people and necessary.
Last question that came quite often: why is the content so split? Is there a short answer?
The short answer is
politics.
Yeah,
history.
Yeah, I would say yes. There was, who's responsible for what, and part of it is around audience segmentation, end users, IT pros, admins, and developers. And so they've generally had content on different sites targeted for different users, what we consider end users, IT pros and admins, and developers. Access is a very unique case in that it is a developer platform, but we also have people just using the app. And so that's more or less the answer. It's politics.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Great presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate the invite. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.